So, Chairman, we're at apologies for absence.
Yeah.
At the moment, we have an apology from Councillor Tom Walsh. At the moment, we have no further apologies from the members of this committee. But if we do have members who join the meeting late, we would admit them into the virtual chamber. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we move on to declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? Pecuniary, non-pecuniary, or any other kind?
Chairman, as the members this afternoon are looking at proposals for Planning Committee Members Forum, there should be no declarations of interest from members on a personal interest. This is a piece of business that will affect the council's arrangements if approved going through the process. So I wouldn't anticipate members to declare any personal or disclose pecuniary interests in this matter. But if anything does come up during the debate and conversation, we will take those forward at that time. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So then we'll move on to the proposals then, I think, which
Chairman,
unless there's something I've missed, is there?
Just to confirm that we do have public question time listed on the agenda, but we have no registered speakers for today. So there's no formal business for that item. So we're now agenda item 5, the proposal for the Planning Committee Members Forum. Thank you.
Okay, so that's the proposals for Planning Committee Members Forum, pages 5 to 14. And I'm guessing that Chris drew the short straw and therefore is going to present for us. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman, and huge pleasure. Thank you for inviting me along today to present the proposals for the Planning Committee Members Forum. I haven't got a formal presentation for you. I was just going to briefly introduce the paper. It's relatively brief in terms of size. I'm very keen, obviously, to hear members' comments, suggestions and feedback in relation to the proposals. But just to set the scene, really, members will recall that we made a change to the planning schema delegation at the end of 2020, full council approved in December 2020, a new schema delegation for planning. And as part of that, it approved the principle of the members forum that set out the additional steps that would be required to take those proposals forward. So in the intervening time, we've now worked those proposals up, and the paper that's before you this afternoon includes a suggested draft terms of reference for the members forum. Just to highlight again, just in terms of sort of key principles, really, the purpose of the members forum is to enable the consultation and engagement with members of the council's planning committee at a pre-application stage of the process. So you'll be aware at the moment there is no such engagement that takes place during the planning process. The first time that members of the council's planning committee get to see proposals is where those applications come through for formal determination. So the members forum proposal would enable that engagement at the pre-application, pre-submission and potentially application stage prior to the determination of the application. It would allow applicants and developers to attend the forum, present their proposals, and it would give members an opportunity to ask questions and clarifications. It's really important to state that this is not proposed as a decision-making committee. So unlike the formal determination would still sit with the council's planning committee, that's where ultimately the decisions would be made. But the purpose of this is to facilitate that engagement that at the moment doesn't take place at the moment. And you would also have noted that as part of the proposals, where we have applications that are scheduled to be considered, we would look to extend the invitations to the relevant ward members and also to the relevant parish councils, if applicable. And the idea behind that is to pull together the elected representatives from the local area with an opportunity for them to see planning proposals going through the process. Happy to provide further clarifications, questions. In terms of sort of key next stages and steps, we presented these proposals last Friday to the Developing Democracy Group. We're obviously here this afternoon. The same paper is due to be considered at Planning Committee tomorrow evening to get some feedback from Planning Committee members as well. Subject to that consultation and the feedback that's received, The intention is then to do some consultation with parish councils in June, prior to taking a report through to full council in July. But as I said, that's very much dependent on obviously the feedback that we have on the proposals. But that's the timetable that we're looking at. Obviously, very keen to hear feedback this afternoon and comments and questions from members. I'm more than happy. I've got a summary of some of the comments that were received from Developing Democracy Group next week. But I'm in your hands, Chairman, as to whether you want me to feedback from DDG, or if you prefer just to open it up for discussion based on the paper. So more than happy to do that, and obviously answer any further questions. But hopefully that sets the scene for everybody in terms of the paper in the background for you.
Thank you, Chris. Having you've seen the feedback from DDG, obviously, so do you feel that feedback will help us to short circuit any questions that have already been raised or made, or should we just dive in and risk repeating everything?
I'm completely in your hands, Chairman. So I'm happy to do what would assist members. That's obviously keen to hear your feedback as well on the proposals. So.
Okay, well we'll jump straight in and see what happens. I think.
Chairman,
yes.
could I suggest that Mrs. Gabrielle Spray, the Cabinet Member for Planning, is in attendance this afternoon. Would you like to invite Mrs. Spray to say a few words before opening the matter to members for general questions?
Yes, okay, if Gabrielle is ready to do so.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Very happy to do that. Thank you, Emma. We've had several, I think, very useful discussions prior to this meeting today. Chris and I did a meeting with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Planning Committee, Councillors Mrs. Scattergood and Mrs. Parker, just to answer a few questions they had. And then, as Chris said, we had DDG last Friday. This is, it's quite a step change for this authority in terms of how we manage the planning process. Up until now, it's always been a rule, really, that certainly members of the planning committee should not meet with and discuss with developers their applications prior to anything coming to committee, and that's in order to ensure that there is sort of clear water between the application being discussed at committee and any decision being made. So this is a change. I personally think it's a good one. It is an opportunity for developers, and we can't compel them to come to members forum, but it is an opportunity for them to come, make a presentation and be asked questions. And I think we have been very clear all the way along, and the paper makes it clear that the forum is not a decision-making opportunity in any way at all. And there will be training for all members of the planning committee and the planning committee substitutes. If this meets with approval and gets approved at council, hopefully in July, and goes ahead, there will be training for committee members. It's just important to note that there will be no decisions made at the forums, but it is a chance maybe to iron out in advance of applications coming to committee perhaps any queries that members of the committee have on what is being presented to them, and it's a chance for developers to go away, have a think about any changes they might feel would be beneficial before the applications actually come to committee. So I do think it's a positive. It's a different way of thinking for us. I know that Chris is familiar with the process from a previous local authority he was involved in, and feels that I think they probably had similar queries about it, but when it was launched in practice, it worked well. So I'm hopeful it would do the same for us. I think there are just times over the last few years when quite major and complex applications have come to the planning committee and they've been deferred or even refused because the committee has not felt comfortable with what is being presented, and this process might just stop that happening, and means that what we're actually given is something that is very acceptable to this authority in terms of, you know, design and layout, things which we are in this authority, certainly we do ask very high standards. So I'm happy, you know, I'm very happy with the paper as it is. There were a few queries thrown up at the previous meetings around the frequency. One concern was definitely around the frequency of the meetings. It's already, planning committee is already the busiest committee. You know, we still meet every fortnight, and this will add a certain number of meetings, but the proposal is that we go to a 3-week cycle with planning committee. And I think with the members forum, we will just have to wait and see how it pans out in terms of the number of meetings, because it does depend on the take up. But both Chris and I think, happy to answer any questions anyone may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spray. Okay, does anybody have any questions? I see David's hand is up. Councillor Mann, you're first.
Well, just to feedback some of the points that were raised at sort of DGG on Friday, that perhaps we weren't focusing on before we actually got the paper. I think one thing we took away was you can't compel applicants to take part in this process. I mean, the thought is that those coming forward on allocated site who have cooperated with the planning system will likely to be prepared to do so, because it may well be in their best interest, but there may be a resistance from speculative applicants who may wish to bypass this stage in its entirety and go straight to the planning committee for decision. That is something that they can choose to do. I think the point was made that members of the planning committee will have to behave differently at a forum than they do at an actual planning committee. Gabrielle's already alluded to that. You have to be very careful not to leave any hostage to fortune, not to phrase questions in a way that doesn't involve a member of the planning committee giving a value judgment, as it were, in advance, because that must be confined to the planning committee itself. So the training will be useful in that it will, you know, hopefully teach us to phrase sort of questions in an appropriate manner that will be sort of acceptable. I did think of one additional question or possible problem that after DGG, and that's how are we going to deal with, or what would be an appropriate way to deal with local members who come along with a shopping list. I mean, we do know that we do have members of the planning committee and other members who think that their particular, often very small community is worthy of a doctor's surgery or you know, a local public hall or sports facility. How are we going to inject some realism into their possible bids, and will it be appropriate that they are in fact making those because we don't want to be in a position, well, yeah, you want 50 houses, but if you want them, you've got to build a shop. That sort of thing. I'm not sure how we can stop members, saying it as they see it, and maybe that needs to be included in the sort of the briefing process before we actually do it.
Okay, thank you, David. Any further questions from anybody? No? So you're going to get away very easily today. None so far. I would just add on to David's point about members' expectations, and maybe the best way to deal with that would be to add a members' evening onto the development programme or something. Emma, you have a question?
Chairman, it was just to probably provide some clarification. The point that Councillor Mann made about the local ward members coming forward, I think they'll be dealt with through the training to be given to members, making it very clear. Apologies from Kinko, unfortunately she's not with us tonight, but she attended DGG and spoke in response to a question on predetermination and bias, how a briefing note will be provided to the members and for members to be trained on that. So equally, a member coming forward with a shopping list would be, is an issue of bias. So hopefully the training which will be given will reinforce to those members who are coming forward to understand this is not a negotiation. The terms of reference for the member forum are very clearly set out on page 14. So it's acts as a consultative forum reviewing the application to ask questions and seek clarification. So part of that process will be reinforcing with members that what you're actually doing is outside the scope of the forum. I think it'll be realistic for the first few member forums, there will be additional officers in support to make sure that members don't paint the authority into a corner in terms of its decision making. We do have to be very careful that this is not a process that's misunderstood by members who are less familiar with the planning process, and also a process that's not taken advantage of by applicants, because obviously through conversations, a off-the-cuff remark from a member could give an applicant great hope if they feel that they can deliver on a point that's been raised. So I think that's something that we would look through carefully through the member training in this being an active and productive forum, but also safeguarding the committee in its decision making, and also safeguarding the individual members against any allegation of predetermination and bias, and attempting to use their influence to obtain a benefit or disadvantage for anybody else. So there's going to be quite a lot of code training that sits alongside this as well, which Kim's already referred to in the DGG process. So I hope that helps to explain a little bit things further as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Emma. Councillor Sprague.
Thank you, Chairman. I think just to add as well that it will be, I think, made clear to developers when they come to the forum, the fact that they make a presentation, take questions and comments away, does not in any way guarantee that when their application comes to the planning committee that it's going to be granted. I think it's just important that they recognise that. I believe one of the questions that was asked at I think at DDG on Friday was, would it be mentioned in the planning committee report that a developer had brought this to the members forum, without going into any great detail? Would members be, and the public be made aware that they had taken the trouble to do that? And I think the answer is yes, but it certainly does not guarantee them, a positive decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Chris, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to come back just to elaborate on what Emma was just saying there as well. So just in relation to the training, I think there's possibly 2 points there. So in that example that Councillor Mann you gave about a shopping list of expectations from development. So I think there's a more general point there in terms of planning, in terms of what can be secured as a planning obligation to mitigate the impact of the particular developments. There's possibly a wider point there in terms of member training and what you can and cannot secure through the planning system. So I think that's one point as well. And the other point related to this as well is, which you may have noted from the paper, is the intention would be that in advance of the members forum, officers would prepare briefing notes for all members that are due to be in attendance. Now, it's not intended that that briefing note is almost a mini committee report or anything like that. We'd be talking about maybe 1-2 sides of A4 that sets out the very factual position in relation to that proposal and perhaps provide some clarification. So certainly it would set out the local plan position, and potentially if it related to a strategic site, for instance, it can elaborate in terms of what the expectation would be in terms of those key policy aims and aspirations for that allocation, including any potential mitigation if anything is proposed on site. So we might be able to give some clarification on that. But again, as Emma's mentioned, the training for all of this is going to be key for members in terms of how those questions or clarifications get raised at the forum and how that's done. But there is also a general point in terms of the wider membership, in terms of understanding of the planning system and also what can and cannot be secured through the planning application process and through Section 106. So I thought that additional comment hopefully was of help, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Just some comments really running on from that are that I think unless you're actively involved in the planning committee, planning remains for most members a strange beast, that there are more facets to than you can cut off with a sword. And so it's probably the biggest problem for ward members and the thing that they understand the least about, notwithstanding training that's been given. Unless you're doing it regularly, it wanders to the back, certainly of my mind. And with advancing years, it takes longer for the back to get to the front again. And so anything that enhances the understanding of ordinary members of planning and what can be achieved is good. And I think that also applies to town and parish councils. So hopefully there would be some briefing available for parish councillors who seem to me to wander from total disinterest to tying themselves in front of the tractor and everything in between. So, you know, some enhanced understanding for them before we get into members' forums, I think would be good. The forum itself seems to me to be a very necessary engagement with ward members and parish councillors to close the gap between BDC and parish councils, which on occasion does seem to be quite wide. Other occasions we're side by side fighting the same battle, and it amazes me how quickly parish councils forget that last week we were allies, this week it's the wicked council, and I still can't get my head around that. So this may well help to close that gap. So I quite like the idea of that. I do think the big issue will be trying to keep particularly parish councillors aware that it's not a decision-making place, and it's not something where they can turn around and say, we don't want this because, you know, it's more of a, you know, what's the design going to be, what's the impact on the area going to be, and all of those things. And that should be an interesting exercise, and good luck with that. I think the only other comment I've got is that where you say on the draft terms of reference that it's voluntary and applicants don't have to attend, I think they would be quite foolish not to want to engage with the local people. I mean, it's interesting that there's an application going in my ward at the moment, and the developer has declined invitations to go to the parish council 2 months running, and come up with excuses that have not made their application more amenable, if you see what I mean. So, you know, it would, whilst it's not compulsory, they would be foolish not to attend, I think. And I think that's all that I have to say. Has anybody else got any comments? Silence came the stern reply. I think, oh, no, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to, just on that last point, which I think was a really good point, just in terms of that engagement, in terms of developers, and how although that we can't compel applicants and developers to attend, we have mentioned this within the paper, but a key thing I think from our perspective as officers is that we were very conscious that actually this needs to go hand in hand with our current sort of pre-application advice process, and that developers shouldn't be able to pick and choose who they, in terms of the approach, so i.e. whether or not they simply approach officers and have that engagement with us during the pre-application process, or go to members forum. The idea going forward, should this move forward, is that it would come as a package, so that developers and applicants couldn't pick and choose, that if they want to engage with officers as part of the pre-application process, which is something which is actively encouraged through the National Planning Policy Framework. It's something that government has encouraged for a very long time, that it comes as a package, and that they would then be coming and attending through the members forum. And as part of the proposals, we're looking to include and cover the cost of that. So effectively, again, that would be included within the fee that they pay for the pre-application engagement, to make sure that that's cost neutral to the authority. So although we can't compel, I think that hopefully would address that point about applicants and agents, wanting to approach the authority, and particularly, the way we set the threshold out, it would be applicable for those applications that would then go naturally flow through to planning committee for determination based on the scheme of delegation. So I thought that would just be useful. Obviously, it's set out in the paper, but it is obviously a new concept for Braintree, but elsewhere, and my own experience from working with something very similar at another authority, was that actually this was something which was in terms of that engagement, it was something that was taken up quite widely, and as evidenced with developers in terms of the amount of material and so forth that they produce in advance of planning committee, and how they seek to put their applications in before the authority. So hopefully those comments are useful, Chairman.
Thank you, Chris. Any further comments? No. Okay, so we are asked to consider the proposals. I'm not quite sure what that means. We've considered them. We're not obviously going to vote on them. So have we all considered them? I think we have. So no further comments to add to what's come out of DDG then, I think.
Chairman, Jess in the formal minute will capture the committee's comments on the proposed forum and summary of the questions asked. But Chairman, just to pick up another point that was made at DDG, just for completeness, there was a conversation around members' allowances with the member forum. Just to touch upon that. Because of the frequency which the planning committee currently meets, members of the planning committee receive a special responsibility allowance. We at the moment, there is no intention to review the members' allowances for the planning committee. But we will keep the progress of the forums under review and how that impacts upon the committee. And then we will then look at whether there needs to be any changes to the members' allowance scheme. So under the members' allowance scheme, there is no allowance attracted for attending the member forums. That's currently not within scheme. And to bring that within scheme, we'd have to go through the IRP, that's the Independent Remuneration Panel process, to introduce a new allowance if that was desired. But we would look to do that for the new administration, not something that we would bring in at this stage. So just to make you aware of the conversations that had at DGG around that particular point, and any changes to the members' allowance scheme, as I say, has to go through IRP and then to be approved by full council. So it is quite a lengthy process, and it's something that has to be evidence-based. So we will need to see an operation of this scheme for a period of time before making any changes to the scheme through that panel process. Chris, could we just touch upon the consultation with the parish councils? The parish councils, I understand, will be consulted early this month. We're looking at 6th of January to the 31st of July, just so that members of this committee are aware.
Yeah, so as mentioned, Emma, yeah, the intention is obviously subject to the feedback that we've had from the three committees. The intention was then to go out to consult parish councils in June. One of the comments made at DDG on Friday was just around the timing of that, see if we could bring it forward slightly. So that's something that we're looking at. So again, subject to the feedback from the planning committee this week, we may be able to try to get something out before the bank holiday weekend, but if not, we'll look to get out the consultation as soon as possible, and then run that for a good period of time, and hopefully get some feedback from parish councils and town councils on the details of the proposals. But yeah, that's very much the intention before looking to report that to full council in July. So that's the timetable at the moment that we're working on.
Okay, thank you. Right, so if we then go back to the agenda, we are asked to consider the proposals. I think we have, but can I take it that we have considered them, and I'll take silence as agreement that we have? And yeah, silence. So thank you. The recommendations have been noted, and we have no further business on the agenda that I'm aware of. I'm waiting for somebody to correct me, but no. So no, therefore, that's. I would like to close this meeting at 5:41.
4:41, Chairman.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, 4:41. I will learn to tell the time before it's too late. Yeah, went on longer than we thought, didn't it? 5:41.
Thank you, Chair.